My brother lit my grandmother's last gift on fire in front of 93 people. He held the yellowed envelope over a candle at her own funeral reception, laughing as the edges curled black. What he didn't see, what nobody saw, was the small brass key that slipped from the burning paper into my palm, still warm, still carrying the scent of my grandmother's rose perfume mixed with smoke. I closed my fingers around that key so hard it left an imprint in my skin for 3 days. Let me back up. I'm Elena. I'm 32 years old. I'm a hospice nurse, which means I spend my life helping people die with dignity. I hold hands at 3 a.m. I call family members who never visit. I clean bodies and close eyes and whisper prayers in languages I've learned phonetically because that's what my patients need in their final moments. My family considers this embarrassing. My brother Marcus, 41, heir to our father's commercial real estate empire, featured in Forbes twice, owner of a watch collection worth more than my apartment, tells people I work in healthcare. He says it the same way you'd say someone works in sanitation. Technically accurate, intentionally diminishing. Grandma Rose was different. She was my father's mother, but she was nothing like him. While he built towers and crushed competitors, she collected first editions and fed stray cats and wrote letters to political prisoners. She was the only person in my family who ever asked me about my patients, who remembered their names, who sent cards when I told her someone had passed peacefully. She died on a Tuesday in September in her sleep at 91 years old. I wasn't there. I was across the country, holding someone else's grandmother's hand through her final breath. The funeral was at the family estate. 300 acres of Virginia horse country, a house with 17 bedrooms, and a reception hall that could comfortably seat 200. My father had spared no expense, not because he loved his mother, but because appearances mattered. I flew in that morning wearing the only black dress I owned, carrying a small suitcase. Nobody picked me up from the airport. I took an Uber. The reception was already underway when I arrived. Caterers in black and white circulated with champagne and crab cakes. The string quartet played something mournful. My father stood in the center of a circle of men in expensive suits, accepting condolences he didn't feel. I found a corner. I always found corners. That's when Marcus approached me, holding an envelope. "The lawyer found this," he said. His breath smelled like scotch. Expensive scotch. "Grandma left it for you specifically. Thought you might want it." For one moment, one stupid, hopeful moment, I thought this was an act of kindness, that maybe death had softened something in him. Then I saw his smile. "Let's see what worthless thing the old woman left the worthless daughter," he announced, loud enough for the nearby guest to turn. He held the envelope up. It was old, sealed with wax, my name written in Grandma's careful handwriting. "Marcus, don't—" He tore it open before I could finish. Inside were papers, old papers. They looked like certificates of some kind, faded and yellowed, a small brass key on a thin chain, a photograph I couldn't see clearly. Marcus laughed. "Stock certificates? For some company called NovaTech Solutions?" He squinted at the papers. "Never heard of it. Probably some scam Grandma fell for in the 80s. He turned to the crowd that had gathered. "Can you believe this? She left her nurse money she got hustled out of by some fake stock scheme?" The guests laughed. Politely, uncomfortably. But Marcus wasn't done. He grabbed a candle from a nearby table, one of the memorial candles, lit for Grandma's memory, and held the edge of the envelope to the flame. "Let me put these out of their misery," he said. "Save you the embarrassment of trying to cash worthless paper." I lunged forward, but my father's hand caught my arm. His grip was iron. His voice was ice. "Don't make a scene, Elena. It's just paper." The envelope burned. The certificates burned. Marcus dropped the flaming mess into a champagne bucket, where it sizzled and died in someone's abandoned Dom Perignon. Everyone laughed again, louder this time. But something had fallen. In the chaos, in my lunge forward, I felt something hit my open palm. Small. Metal. Warm. The key. I closed my fingers around it and said nothing. "Before you hear the rest, let me ask you something. What's the worst thing a family member has ever done to you at a celebration? A wedding? A funeral? A birthday? Drop it in the comments. Because I promise you, whatever they did, You'll feel seen by the end of this story. I left that reception without saying goodbye. I walked out through the service entrance, past the caterers, past the valets, past the acres of manicured lawn. I walked until I reached the road, and then I called another Uber. My father didn't follow. Marcus didn't notice. My mother, on her fourth glass of wine, probably didn't even register I'd been there at all. The key sat in my palm the entire ride to the airport. It wasn't until I was home, 2,000 miles away, sitting on my second-hand couch in my tiny apartment, that I looked at it closely. Engraved on the side, almost worn away, First National Trust, Box 1847. At TN, Rosa Martinez-Caldwell. Grandma's maiden name. A safe deposit box. One that nobody, not my father, not Marcus, not the family lawyers, apparently knew existed. I booked a flight back to Virginia for the next morning. 22 hours later, I walked into First National Trust, dressed in scrubs because I'd come straight from a shift, holding a brass key and my grandmother's death certificate. The bank manager looked at the key. Then he looked at his computer. Then he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen directed my way before. He looked at me like I mattered. "Ms. Caldwell," he said slowly, "I think you'd better come with me." The bank manager's name was Walter. He was 63, wore a wedding ring he kept touching like a worry stone, and he looked at me like I'd just walked in carrying plutonium. "This box," he said, leading me down a corridor lined with polished brass and hushed carpet, "has been in our vault since 1987. Mrs. Martinez-Caldwell paid the rental fees in advance. 50 years. Prepaid." 50 years? She was very specific. She wanted to make sure that whatever happened to her, this box would be waiting. He paused at a heavy door, swiped a keycard. "For you." The vault room was cold, climate-controlled cold, the kind of cold that preserves things. Box 1847 was larger than I expected, the size of a small filing cabinet. When Walter pulled it out and set it on the brushed steel table, his hands were trembling slightly. "I'll give you privacy," he said. "Take all the time you need." The key fit perfectly. Inside, I found one leather portfolio, cracked with age but carefully preserved. One envelope, sealed with the same wax seal my brother had destroyed. One handwritten letter, addressed to me. And one photograph, the same one that had burned. Grandma and me at my nursing school graduation. The only family member who'd attended. I opened the letter first. "My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, then I've died, and your brother has behaved exactly as I expected him to. I left decoy documents with the family lawyer, stock certificates that look worthless, papers that seem meaningless. I knew Marcus would find them. I knew what he would do. He is his father's son. But you, my darling, are mine. In the portfolio, you'll find the real certificates, the original shares I purchased in 1987 in a little company called NovaTech Solutions. They've changed their name several times since then. You might know them now as Nexus Dynamics." I stopped breathing. Nexus Dynamics, the tech conglomerate, the company that had gone public 3 years ago at $42 a share and now traded at over $400. My hands shook as I opened the portfolio. Inside were certificates, hundreds of them, original paper stock certificates, the kind they don't even issue anymore. 12,000 shares. I did the math 3 times. Then I did it on my phone. Then I asked Walter to come back in, and he did it for me while I sat very still and tried not to throw up. 12,000 shares of Nexus Dynamics. At current market value, $4.8 million. Walter was speaking. Something about verification, about transfer agents, about how paper certificates could be authenticated and converted. I heard maybe 30% of it. My grandmother had left me nearly $5 million, and my brother had burned the decoys, thinking he was burning garbage. A memory surfaced, uninvited, unwelcome, unstoppable. I was 12. Christmas morning. My grandmother had given me a first edition copy of Little Women, inscribed with a note about strong women and quiet courage. Marcus was 17, home from boarding school, already wearing our father's cruelty like a comfortable coat. He found the book while I was helping Grandma in the kitchen. When I came back, he was reading her inscription aloud to my parents in a mocking falsetto. May you always find your own path, even when others try to choose it for you. He laughed. My father laughed. My mother took another sip of wine. Then Marcus dropped the book into the fireplace. The smell of burning leather, the sound of my grandmother gasping, the texture of the oriental rug beneath my knees as I lunged for it, burning my fingers trying to save what I could. My father grabbed my arm then too. Same grip, same ice. Don't be dramatic, Elena. It's just a book. I saved 8 pages. I still have them. They smell like smoke and something broken. My grandmother took me aside that night and said, "Keep your treasures where they can't find them, and when the time comes, you'll have everything you need." I didn't understand until now. Walter was still talking. And the certificates are fully transferable, registered solely in your name. There are no liens, no encumbrances, and no other parties with any claim. Mrs. Martinez-Caldwell was very thorough. My family can't touch this? Walter's expression flickered. Ah, he'd done his research. He knew who my family was. No, Ms. Caldwell. This is yours and yours alone. The account predates any family trusts, any corporate structures, any marital assets. It's cleaner than most inheritances I've ever processed. I left the bank with the portfolio in my bag, my grandmother's letter pressed against my heart, and a very specific kind of numbness settling into my bones, the good kind. That night I called Priya. Priya Sharma had been my college roommate, my emergency contact, and the closest thing I had to a sister. She was also a forensic accountant who specialized in corporate fraud, which meant she spent her days untangling exactly the kind of financial webs my family wove for a living. "So, let me make sure I understand," she said, after I'd explained everything. "Your grandmother left you almost $5 million in stock, hidden specifically so your brother couldn't destroy it or your father couldn't steal it." That's the summary, yes. And Marcus burned what he thought was the inheritance in front of everyone? On video. Someone posted it to Instagram. Family drama content, I guess. Priya was quiet for a moment. Then, "Elena, there's something you should know." "What?" I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't want to get your hopes up, but your brother's company has been on my radar for months. Caldwell Commercial is hemorrhaging money. There's an SEC investigation brewing. He's been covering losses with creative accounting that's about to become very uncreative when the auditors finish their work. My heart was pounding. How bad? Bad enough that if your father's estate wasn't backing him, he'd have filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. But here's the thing. Your father's estate is backing him, and that means when Marcus goes down, he might take the whole family with him. The whole family? The trust, the real estate holdings, everything your father built. Priya paused. Marcus has been borrowing against assets he doesn't actually own. He's been forging signatures. Elena, your brother has been committing fraud. I sat in my dark apartment, $5 million in a bag at my feet, and felt something I hadn't felt in 32 years. Power. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't seen in months. "Marcus, we need to talk. Family business. Call me tomorrow. It's urgent." I stared at those words for a long time. He didn't know yet. He didn't know what Grandma had really left me. He didn't know that I knew about his fraud. He thought I was still the silent sister, the invisible nurse, the family embarrassment who would come when called and leave when dismissed. He was about to find out differently. I texted back a single word. Tomorrow. Then I turned off my phone and started to plan. Marcus called at 7 a.m. as if my time meant nothing. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Voice steady, heart steady. Everything steady except my hands, which I pressed flat against my kitchen table until they stopped shaking. "Elena." He didn't say hello. Marcus never said hello to people he considered beneath him. "We need to discuss Grandma's estate." "I thought her estate went to Father, with you as executor." "The main estate, yes, but there are complications." He paused. I could hear the discomfort in his voice. Marcus hated asking for anything. The lawyers found some irregularities. Grandma apparently made some investments decades ago that weren't properly documented. We need to do a full accounting. And what does this have to do with me? You might have been named in some ancillary documents, probably nothing valuable, but for tax purposes, we need you to sign over any potential claims to the family trust. Standard procedure. Standard procedure. The phrase he always used when he was about to take something that wasn't his. I see. I'm sending a courier with the paperwork today. Sign everything and send it back. We'll handle the rest. I let silence hang between us, long enough to make him uncomfortable. Elena, are you there? I'm here. But Marcus, I don't think I'm going to sign anything without understanding what I'm signing. His voice sharpened, the mask slipping just a little. What's there to understand? Grandma left you some worthless papers I already burned. This is just legal cleanup. Then you won't mind if I have a lawyer review the documents first. A lawyer? You? He laughed. That same laugh from the funeral. From my 12th birthday. From every moment he'd ever dismissed me. What would you even pay a lawyer with, Elena? You work in healthcare. You live in a one-bedroom apartment. You don't have the resources to challenge. He stopped himself, but not fast enough. Challenge what, Marcus? Silence. Then a recalibration. I could almost hear his thoughts rearranging. Look, I didn't mean it like that. I know things have been strained between us, but this is important. The family needs this handled quickly. And honestly, Elena, it could be worth something to you. A goodwill gesture. Maybe I could arrange for a small settlement. 20,000? For any hypothetical claims you might have? $20,000. He was trying to buy me off for $20,000 when I had $5 million in a safe deposit box with my name on it. That's very generous, Marcus. I'm trying to be fair. That's what brothers are for. That's what brothers are for. I let the phrase hang, memorized it, saved it for later. I appreciate that, but I'd still like to review everything properly. Tell you what, I'll fly out next week. We can meet with the lawyers together, in person. He didn't like that. I could tell. Marcus preferred to control situations remotely, through paperwork and pressure. That's not necessary. I insist. Besides, I heard you're hosting a big event next Saturday. Something for the company? I'd hate to miss a chance to see the family. He was trapped. Refusing would look suspicious. Agreeing gave me access. Fine, he said finally. Next Saturday. We'll discuss everything then. Perfect. I'm looking forward to it. I hung up and let out a breath I'd been holding for 3 minutes. The next 5 days were a masterclass in preparation. Priya brought in a lawyer, Grace Okonkwo, terrifying in the best possible way, with a reputation for dismantling corrupt executives the way some people disassemble furniture. Your brother, Grace said, reviewing the documents Priya had gathered, is not a smart criminal. He's an arrogant criminal. There's a difference. She laid out the evidence. Marcus had been siphoning money from the family trust for years, covering bad investments with creative accounting. He'd forged signatures, including my father's, on loan documents. He'd pledged assets he didn't own as collateral. And most damning, he'd been lying to the SEC about Caldwell Commercial's financial health. All of this is about to collapse, Grace said. The only question is who gets caught in the debris. What about my father? Your father is either complicit or negligent. Either way, he's exposed. But here's the interesting part. She pulled out another document. Your grandmother saw this coming. Decades ago. The way she structured your inheritance makes it completely untouchable by any family creditors. She specifically insulated you from their debts. She protected me. She protected you. And now, if you want, we can use that protection offensively. I thought about 12-year-old me kneeling on that oriental rug, burning my fingers trying to save something precious while my family laughed. Tell me how. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus needed capital. Desperately. The SEC investigation was accelerating, and he needed to show liquidity before the auditors arrived. If I appeared to be a weak, compliant sister offering to sign over potential claims in exchange for a modest settlement, he would jump at it. But the document he would sign wouldn't be a simple transfer. It would be a confession. Grace drafted it carefully. Buried in the dense legalese of the settlement agreement was language that explicitly acknowledged every fraudulent transaction Marcus had made. By signing, he would be admitting, in writing, notarized, witnessed, to forging documents, misleading investors, and embezzling from the family trust. He won't read it, I said. He won't read it, Grace agreed. Men like Marcus never read what they sign. They believe their power protects them from consequences. The second part of the trap was even simpler. Marcus's big event, the one he'd mentioned, was the launch party for Caldwell Commercial's new development project. 300 guests, press coverage, investors, politicians, society figures, the perfect stage for a fall. "You're sure about this?" Priya asked, the night before I flew out. "Once you do this, there's no going back. Your family will never forgive you." I looked at the 8 pages of Little Women I'd saved from the fire, framed now, hanging above my bed, at my grandmother's letter, pressed between glass, at the brass key that had started everything. "My family never loved me," I said. "They just owned me. There's nothing to forgive." Saturday came. I arrived at the Caldwell estate wearing a dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion. Not expensive, but perfect. Simple black, elegant cut, the kind of dress that made people look twice. For the first time in my life, I wanted to be seen. Marcus met me at the entrance, already performing. Big smile, warm handshake, the gracious brother welcoming his wayward sister. "Elena, so glad you could make it. Let's find somewhere private to handle that paperwork, and then you can enjoy the party." He led me to our father's study, the same room where I'd been dismissed 1,000 times, where I'd been told I was worthless, ungrateful, disappointing. The leather portfolio sat on the desk, the settlement agreement, my alleged surrender. Marcus slid it across to me with a pen. "Just sign everywhere I've flagged. Then we can put all this unpleasantness behind us." I picked up the pen, held it, looked at the document. "Actually, Marcus, I've made some revisions. My lawyer suggested a few changes." I slid my own version across the table. Identical on the surface, lethal underneath. He didn't even glance at the differences. Fine. Legal details." He signed with a flourish. Then he had his assistant notarize it. Then he handed me my copy with a patronizing smile. "There, all done. Now you can stop pretending to be something you're not." "And what am I, Marcus?" "You're the one who failed, Elena. The one who ran away and became a nurse. While I built this..." He gestured at the estate, the party outside, the empire. "You changed bedpans. And now you want to be included? Now you want to matter?" He leaned in close, scotch on his breath, contempt in his eyes. "You were always the stupid one, Elena. The worthless one. Grandma pitied you, and pity is all you've ever deserved." I smiled. "Thank you, Marcus." "For what?" "For reminding me who you really are." I stood up, tucked both copies of the document into my bag, and walked toward the door. "See you at the announcement," I said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The ballroom of the Caldwell estate glittered with 300 guests, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of wealth that insulates people from reality. Waiters circulated with champagne that cost more per bottle than I made in a shift. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable. The who's who of Virginia society air-kissed and networked and pretended to mourn my grandmother while celebrating my brother. I stood at the back of the room, invisible as always, but not for long. Marcus took the stage at 8 o'clock exactly. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the logo for his new development project, the Caldwell Legacy Center, a mixed-use complex that promised to revitalize a struggling neighborhood. The press release called it philanthropic development. Priya's investigation called it a money laundering scheme that would displace hundreds of families while funneling investor money into Marcus's personal accounts. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced, his voice carrying that practiced warmth that fooled everyone but me. "I'm thrilled to announce that as of today, the Caldwell Legacy Center is fully funded." Applause, of course. They always applauded. "This project represents everything my family stands for: legacy, vision, and the understanding that some of us are meant to lead." He looked out at the crowd like a king surveying his kingdom. "I want to thank my father for his guidance, my partners for their trust, and—" His eyes found me in the back of the room. A flicker of satisfaction. "My sister Elena, who graciously agreed to support this family endeavor with her full cooperation." More applause. I didn't move. Marcus smiled wider. "In fact, I'm pleased to announce that all potential complications regarding my grandmother's estate have been resolved. Every family member is now aligned behind the Caldwell vision." He was doing it. Right now. Publicly claiming what he thought he'd stolen from me. I started walking toward the stage. The crowd parted. Not because they knew me, but because something in my posture made them move. I wasn't the invisible sister anymore. I wasn't the nurse who worked in healthcare. I was something else entirely. Something my grandmother had made me. I reached the stage just as Marcus's smile began to falter. "Elena? What are you—" "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and clear, projecting across the ballroom with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "My brother just told you that I signed away my claims to our grandmother's estate. That's not quite accurate." The room went silent. What I actually signed was a settlement agreement, and so did he. I pulled the notarized document from my bag. But Marcus didn't read what he was signing. He never does. He believes his name protects him from consequences. Marcus's face shifted from confusion to alarm. "What are you talking about? That document—" "That document contains a full acknowledgement of every fraudulent transaction you've made over the past 7 years. Forged signatures, embezzled funds, false statements to investors and regulators. You signed a confession, Marcus. Notarized, witnessed, legally binding." The murmur started low, then grew. Phones came out. Camera flashes. The press, who had come for a puff piece, suddenly had a real story. That's absurd. That's a lie. She's unstable. Everyone knows she's—" "I'm also not poor." I let that land. "Our grandmother left me something at her funeral. You burned it, remember? You told everyone it was worthless stock from a company called NovaTech Solutions. What you didn't know is that NovaTech became Nexus Dynamics. And what you burned was a decoy. The real certificates, 12,000 shares, were in a safe deposit box that's been waiting for me since 1987. Marcus went pale. Actually, visibly pale, like someone had drained the blood from his face. That's not possible. $5 million, Marcus. Give or take. Completely outside the family trust. Completely outside your reach. Grandma knew exactly who you were. She prepared for it." The doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Grace walked in, followed by 3 people in dark suits. SEC investigators. "Marcus Caldwell?" The lead investigator's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to ask you some questions regarding potential securities fraud and embezzlement." The room erupted, guests scrambling for distance, press recording everything. Marcus stood frozen on the stage, the giant screen behind him still displaying his fraudulent dream. My mother materialized at my side, wine sloshing from her glass, her face twisted with fury. "How dare you? How dare you humiliate this family, after everything we did for you?" "You did nothing for me. You looked away while they burned my books and called me worthless. You took another sip of wine every time I needed protection. You ungrateful little—" "Mrs. Caldwell." Grace stepped between us. "I'd recommend not making any statements right now. Depending on your involvement in your son's activities, you may also be facing legal exposure." My mother's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Across the room, my father was surrounded by people demanding explanations he couldn't give, his empire crumbling in real time, the name he'd spent 60 years building becoming synonymous with fraud. Marcus was being led away, still protesting, still insisting there had been a mistake. He looked at me as he passed. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time in his life. "You were supposed to be nothing," he said. "That's what you were. Nothing." "I was invisible," I corrected him. "And you never thought to look at what invisible people can do." 3 months later. I sat on the porch of my grandmother's beach cottage, mine now, legally transferred before her death, completely separate from the family assets currently frozen in litigation. The ocean stretched out before me, gray and endless and free. My phone buzzed. Priya. SEC filing went through. Marcus is looking at 12-15 years. Your father's been named in the civil suit. The trust is being dissolved. You okay? I typed back, more than okay. I was still a nurse. I'd gone back to work the week after the confrontation, held hands through the night shift, helped someone's grandfather die peacefully at dawn. When my coworkers asked what I'd done on my time off, I said, family stuff. They didn't press. That's the thing about invisible people. We know how to hold our peace. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key, the one that had started everything. It was worthless now. The safe deposit box was empty, the contents transferred to proper investments, my grandmother's legacy secured for the next generation. But I'd kept it. I held it up to the morning light one last time, watched it catch the sun, remembered my grandmother pressing it into my palm when I was 12, whispering, "Keep your treasures where they can't find them." Then I walked to the fire pit, where kindling was already laid for the evening. I placed the key in the center. Tonight, I would burn it. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in release. The last physical symbol of the person I'd been. The one who waited to be valued, who hoped to be seen, who believed that someday her family would love her if she was just good enough. That person was gone. I pulled my grandmother's shawl tighter around my shoulders, the one she'd worn every Christmas, the one that still smelled faintly of rose perfume. I'm still Elena, still a nurse, still the person who holds hands at 3 a.m. and whispers prayers in borrowed languages. But I'm not invisible anymore, and I've learned something that my brother, in all his power and privilege, never understood. Family isn't blood. It isn't obligation. It isn't a name on a trust document or a seat at a table where no one wants you. Family is the grandmother who saw you when no one else did, the friend who answers the phone at midnight, the strangers whose hands you hold as they leave this world, who thank you with their last breath. Family is whoever chooses you. And for the first time in my life, I choose myself. If this story hit you somewhere deep, share it. Drop a comment about your own moment of quiet defiance. And remember, the people who dismiss you are never ready for the moment you stop asking for their permission.